Have you ever woken up in a bright white room unable to move, watched by people you can't see? I bet you have. Let me explain. I've been suspicious of dreaming for a while. It's always bothered me how people can never seem to accurately remember what happens when they sleep, even after training. Once I was out of school, this interest became something of a obsession. I bought a dream journal. I began writing in it every morning. The results were disappointing. June 18th, dreamless night. June 19th, I think I remember walking around in a meadow. Was it a park? June 20th, I was inside. My journals were so vague that I couldn't help but feel frustrated. College never went anywhere for me. While I did graduate, it wasn't with any amount of honor or in a field I enjoyed. That being said, I at least had some money from my part-time dead-end job at a gas station, so I could at least pay the bills for my crappy apartment and have some leftover. I didn't have enough for a camera, though, so I decided to record myself with my phone set up on a couple of books instead. Nothing. June 21st, I remember the sound of the ocean, but nothing else. June 22nd, dreamless night. June 23rd, I remember lying down in a room. I couldn't feel because it was a dream, but I could tell it was cold. I finally remembered more than vague details in a dream, but it still felt dissatisfying. It was the first dream that I could remember since I started keeping track. It didn't have a plot, just a sense of cold and unease. I know I had dreams in the past. As a kid, I could still vaguely remember going on grand adventures in my sleep, filled with the same sense of majesty and grandeur that I used to have. I stopped having elaborate dreams, or at least ones that I could remember, sometime in college. I assumed it was because of the stress from work and moving out on my own, so I hoped that my dreams would come back to me once that ended. June 24th, I remember seeing someone talking to me, but I was unable to respond. June 25th, dreamless night. 3 parts hydrogen peroxide, 2 parts honey, 4 parts water. Administer intravenously. Remember! June 26th, dreamless night. After I wrote my log for June 8th, I noticed that it seemed I'd skipped a page. I looked at the page before to see instructions. It looked like some demented recipe for a lethal injection, but it felt stranger than that. First of all, it was definitely in my handwriting, but it was much more frantic than anything I'd written in the journal. The page itself showed signs of being abused and crinkled in places from how hard I must have pressed down the pen. Secondly, the way it ended scared me. Remember. But I didn't know what it was referring to. I didn't remember writing down any of it. I decided to push the incident to the back of my mind. I figured it was just some weird dream that I had in the middle of the night that my mind cleared out before I woke up again. I still couldn't help but feel a little nervous about the note, however. It just didn't seem right. Remember. June 27th, dreamless night. Remember. June 28th, dreamless night. Remember. Check desk drawer. Remember. June 29th, cold. I quit my job on June 11th. I know it sounds crazy, but it was a dead-end job anyway. It would have helped me in the long run to leave. I checked my drawer that morning to find a dozen small white pills in an unlabeled bottle. After I came home from work, I must have stared at the bottle for hours, wondering if I was going crazy. I decided that I'd already made one rash decision that day, so I might as well make another. And I downed one of the pills before I went to bed for the night. The pill almost made me gag when it entered my mouth. It tasted nothing like a normal pill, but rather sour and bitter. About half an hour after ingestion, I began to feel the effects while I was lying in bed. I could feel my heart rate increasing and my vision begin to blur. I remember panicking, realizing that I shouldn't have just popped some random pills I found on my desk. My movements felt so slowed down by the drug that I couldn't get out of bed. And the last thing I remember was my body starting to go numb before I slipped out of consciousness. June 30th. I was in a white room with bright lights affixed somewhere I couldn't make out on each wall. Surrounding me were a few people in white suits, whose faces I couldn't remember, who seemed to be observing me. I was stuck in some kind of cold metal table, but I don't remember being strapped down or actually affixed to the table. There was a door off to my right, but I couldn't see beyond it. Remember the syringe. Remember. Remember. I woke up the next morning a few hours after my usual time, and halfway across my apartment from where I usually slept, with my face pressed against the wooden floor of the hallway. My body also felt like crap, as if I had a hangover, but it wasn't too debilitating. I made my way back to my bedroom to find my bed a mess, and my journal wide open with the pen lying next to it on the floor. I began to chastise myself for taking some random expired pills in the desk drawer and suffering the consequences. I picked up the sheets and threw them back into the bed, plopping down on top of them, and taking a dejected look at my journal. However, I was excited by what I actually found. The pill I took seemed to actually work in assisting me with remembering my dream, but the dream itself unsettled me. It seemed eerily similar to the vague details I remembered from past nights, and the scrawled text telling me to remember was still there. What was I supposed to remember, though? Was there something else other than the dream? As I thought about this, I realized that while the dream was recorded in the journal, I had no memory of it now. I reasoned that the only way I was going to actually remember that dream was to use the syringe. The handwriting still all looked like mine. If I was going crazy, at least I could trust myself. I went out to the store to buy what I needed: a hypodermic needle, a bottle of hydrogen peroxide, some honey. And once I got home, I put the ingredients together. I stared at what I created. It was dark, thick, smelled like death. I blocked out the voice in the back of my head telling me to stop and poured it into the syringe before hiding the syringe in the back of my kitchen drawer. After doing so, I sat down in the middle of the kitchen, unable to fully process what I was doing. Was I about to poison myself over a dream? However, upon returning to my room as the sun set, I saw all the reassurance I needed in my journal. I grabbed 3 pills out of the desk drawer. I wanted to be sure that the effect would hit me quickly and strongly enough so that I could experience the dream to its fullest. After I downed them, I immediately felt my senses dull, and I let myself fall onto my bed. I steeled myself for what comes next. I woke up to find myself in a familiar white room. The room was brightly illuminated, but I couldn't see any lights. It felt more as if the walls themselves gave off a glow. The table I was on seemed to be made out of the same material as the walls, and it was cold to the touch. The room was filled with a low humming buzz, like that of a fluorescent light, but louder. There were 3 people standing around me in what looked to be white hazmat suits with dark visors covering their faces. Moving felt difficult, but with effort I found I was able to separate myself from the table. I sat up halfway to get a better look at my surroundings, and the 3 people in the room jerked their heads over and stared at me. One of them approached the table and began to speak in a deep voice that sounded almost robotically smooth. "So, it appears you're moving now," the man spoke, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Don't try to do it too much. You wouldn't want to strain yourself." "Where am I?" "You aren't supposed to know that, and I can assure you a name would have no use to you anyway." "What's that supposed to mean?" "The point is, you aren't supposed to be able to be aware enough to have this conversation in the first place. Clear your subconscious has been collecting materials to form a resistance against our inhibitors." What? Why? What are you going to do to me here?" "You know, we aren't going to tell you anything. So why do you insist on asking? I can tell you that I'm going to use a more powerful inhibitor to knock out your subconscious for good. And after that, you'll have no memory of any of this. And it won't be your problem." It absolutely will be my problem. What are you going to do to me after this?" "What we do with your body while you aren't using it, none of your business." Upon saying this, he pulled out a small syringe with an orange fluid in it and pushed me back down onto the table. With the difficulty I had moving earlier combined with him holding me down, there was no way I could escape his grasp. As he brought the syringe closer to me, I noticed something. One of the other people standing in the room, pushing open a section of wall opposite my table, with almost no resistance. If I was able to move around without being noticed, it may be possible to escape through that door. But it was too late to think about that. Unless I was able to overpower whatever he was about to do to me, I'd have no chance of seeing this dream again. I then felt the syringe pierce my neck and fill my veins with cold liquid that immediately made me black out. When I came to, I was sitting upright in my bed, covered in a cold sweat. My head felt like it was going to split open, and my vision was still very blurry. However, I knew what I needed to do if I wanted to remember the dream and prevent the injection from taking its effect. I half ran, half crawled to the kitchen and opened the drawer to find the syringe I had prepared earlier that day. As I hold it in my hands now, I can Feel the memories of the last few days slowly seeping away. The liquid still looks like death. But I feel sure it won't kill me. That's what they want me to think, right? I hope to God I'm not crazy.